Phil Wills, Chief Commercial Officer of the Cell and Gene Therapy Division within Catalent. I think it's important to, look back at how far we've actually come, up until this point. When we first started doing gene therapies a dozen plus years ago, there were, just a few handful of experimental trials going on. Nothing was commercial. In just short period of time, we've now gotten 12 gene therapy approvals. So a lot has, happened and advanced, and a lot of excitement still remains within the cell and gene therapy about the potential for these types of treatments. But there are definitely some bottlenecks, and they remain the same bottlenecks that we had seen before with respect to on the upstream manufacturing side, the ability for scale. The transient transfection process is a very complicated process that has a very time-dependent aspect to it. And as you go to larger and larger scales, that becomes more difficult to manage and to make sure you can do reproducibly. So that still remains. And then on the downstream side of things, the purification side of things, the separation of empty versus full still also remains a bottleneck. We would like to get to the point in time where there are no empty capsids or intermediates even in the product. Again, we have made huge strides over the last dozen years in terms of being able to now go to 500 and 1,000 liter scale, as well as on the, enrichment for empty versus full, very standard now to be at 80, 90%, full. But getting it over the hump, getting it to the point where there are none, is still a challenge and still a bottleneck. We are in a very advantageous period of time in that we can now look back at those therapies that actually have made it to a commercial product. And, it's not just to approval, right? It's also needs to get to acceptance, access, as well as then adoption within the in the healthcare industry. And so we can take the lessons of those that have managed to do that versus those that have maybe missed some marks, and to be able then to use that lessons as we move forward to build the path at the very beginnings to have that end in sight. And so you may still see in the news some products that are struggling, some things that are not making it, but you have to also keep in mind that those products are ones that started 5, 6 years ago and that are finally now getting to late stage. Those that are starting just now, I can't wait to see where we are in 5 to 8 years, where they take all these lessons learned and they actually can have a much smoother path to commercial success. It's on the scalability of the upstream process, and it is getting the downstream aspect, in terms of the purity, the quality of the product, to the level that it eventually will need to be. There's been a lot of strides made in this. When we first started doing this, it was at 200 liter scale. Now it's 500, 1,000 liter scale, very routine on the empty versus full ratio. When we started doing this, we were happy if we were 50%, full. Now, again, we're 80, 90% full. So there really is a big difference with what we had been, but there's still room to go. I think it's not taking the lessons of those who've done this path before and had the difficulties and learning from them. And I think, one of the advantages that someone would have if they came and partnered with Catalent is the fact that, we have done 4 gene therapy approvals. We have seen from the very beginning all the way to that successful commercial launch. And, we learned a lot during those. And, we can leverage those learnings to help the next customer get to there. And so I realized that, it may be attractive to find someone who's offering a great price because they're doing this for the very first time and they want to actually be able to tell other people they've actually done it. But, you don't want to be the guinea pig. You don't want to be the one that pays them to learn, how to do this. That eventually almost always leads to something coming up that sets you back. And so you will often see 6 months, year delays because of the fact you had CMC issues and the manufacturing sites didn't pass inspections. you go with someone who's been there and done it before, you don't have to put that at risk. You're pretty certain that you're going to be launching when you're expecting to launch. The agency has been really good about being supportive of this industry and understanding the urgency that there is to get these products out to the patients. But as more products go through and get approved, and invariably when they do that, they offer new improvements that the agency then becomes aware of. It becomes expected that what they see with, the latest things that they've seen then becomes more expected for the others. And so there is that constant evolution of increased rigor and increased expectations in terms of what the process and the product look like. But that's to the best of all of us. And again, they're being very reasonable about what they're asking for if they're only asking for things based upon what's actually achievable. Patient first, has been a core value of Catalent for, I think it's now dozen plus years. And is actually when I came originally from Paragon, and was an acquisition of Catalent, and we had gotten to the point where we needed a new owner, and we started looking for who that person or company would be. When Catalent came and they told us about their patient first core value, that really resonated with us. And so we could have actually gone to others that would have paid more for us, but we decided to go to Catalent because of that mission really resonated with us as well, and is core to everything that we do. Patient first is a fundamental core value at Catalent. And unlike a lot of others where this may be just a marketing thing, or to someone just paying lip service to it, it is actually something that came through actual real events, and there was actual realization within the organization that some things would have to change. And when they tried to figure out what needed to happen, it was to really instill this culture of patient first. And so the important thing here is when issues arise, where questions come up, don't ask what's best for the site. Don't ask what's best for the company. Don't even ask what's best for the client. What you'd always ask yourself when you're trying to make a decision, the best thing you should do is what's best for the patient.